Antoinette, Tony Libro's most recent publications include the poetry chapbooks Midnight in the Garden of Indigo. Did I wait long enough, Donna? Mm-hmm. Okay. The Carpenter's Lament in Winter, and collected haiku, poems in the Art of Tanka, Patterson Literary Review, Red Lights, Bottle Rockets, and Florida Journal of Literature, as well as online publications, most recently in Songbirds, Awaka Journal 2025. Her award-winning haiku and tanka, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, as well as longer form poems appear regularly both nationally and internationally. Her haiku was one of 40,000 to place in the top 201 in the Japan Airlines and Haiku Society of America contest of 1987, and the winning haiku were published in an anthology of haiku by people of the United States and Canada. Names of the winners appeared in the New Yorker magazine. Her haibun was published in one of the first anthologies of haibun in the English language following the first ever haibun contest, titled Wedge of Light. It won a Merit Book Award from the Haiku Society of America in 1999. She studied the literature and the arts of Eastern cultures in Kyoto, Japan, under the auspices of New York University during her graduate studies, and was a faculty fellow at Princeton University, where she studied Asian literature. She judges the annual St. John's Cultural Council's Haiku Contest since its inception in 2021, and gives writing workshops in poetry and readings. She is a member of the Haiku Society of America, Tanka Society of America, Yuki Teiki Society, Waka Society, Florida State Poetry Association, Ancient City Poets, and Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Society, among others. She resides in St. Augustine, Florida, following her retirement as Professor Emeritus from Rowan University, Glassboro, New Jersey, and holds a PhD from New York University. Welcome, Antoinette Libro.
Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here today among all of you, and I'm just thrilled to have this opportunity, and thank you for making it possible. I would just like to say that I'm thrilled that I can be a part of this because I so admire this society and all of the people who contribute to the scholarship of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. So I'm very happy to have this little moment in time to share with you my perspective on her work. As you see, the title is a little unusual. I mean, it's not a lost or found situation, but rather a found poetry situation, which means that you just go ahead and find something somewhere else, take it out, and make it into something else. As a poet and writer myself, I must say that the work of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings was like a bonanza to step into and find her language and just be overwhelmed by it. And so that led to the idea of found poetry, which I'll explain a little as we move along. But you heard some words from Ashley that you might not have understood.
I didn't understand.
I know you all know haiku. And I'll just say this is today, April 17, is what? International Haiku Day. So, the nod to that, we will proceed. And you will learn what tanka is, and you will learn what haiku is as we move along. So, all right, voice of the frog, you will learn a little bit more about what that means too, as we move along. All right, to start, we're going to start with haiku. And here are 3 haiku that are sort of like a key into this presentation. And because Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings uses language and has certain motifs that occur over and over again, certain words like cypresses, wonderful word, isn't it? And pine. These haiku have come from her work. October Twilight, the cypress waters alive with a splash of frog. Old weather-worn house, the newer cypress shingles make no difference. Rare Florida snow, the hiss of pine needles on cypress shingles. Okay, so with those 3 haiku, we'll come back to them in the presentation. We'll talk a little bit about how they work. But these were inspired and found in Marjorie Kinnan's creative works. Some of you will recognize already, probably, what book they come from, right? And we'll tell you for sure as we move along. Okay. Just a little introduction. Marjorie's prose, as I say, stirred my imagination. Best word, I think, for it. And the Japanese poems of haiku and tanka seem the most fitting forms for these found poets. Form is an extension of content, and that is why I wound up writing haiku and tanka poems to express what I found in her work. So we do have a term, a definition from the American Academy of Poets about what found poetry is, and it takes existing texts and refashions them, reorders them, and presents them as poems. So that's what I did. I began to lift keywords and images from the passages and arrange them on the page in the short forms of haiku and tanka, and paying attention to all the stuff that goes along with poetry, especially line breaks and rhythms, imagery, emotional slant. Also, and this is key to the work, I began to see the emergence of an Eastern aesthetic in the work of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. So what is haiku? Probably all of us familiar enough to know it's a 17-syllable or fewer line poem which catches a moment in time. It's about nature and the seasons with language that appeals to the 5 senses. And it goes back some 400 years ago in 17th century Japan with Basho, who was considered to be the father of haiku and Japan's most celebrated poet. Some say Japan's Shakespeare, if we want to compare. So, as I mentioned earlier, today, April 17th, is International Poetry Day, which falls in the middle of April, which is National Poetry Month. Okay. So, now, the oldest form that predates haiku, the oldest form, which predates haiku, is the tanka poem. And that goes back to the Heian period of ancient Japan, otherwise known as the period of tranquility, because it was free from strife for several hundred years, a couple hundred years there, and the arts flourished. So this was the mode of communication in the imperial court of Japanese culture and valued as a sign of refinement. Traditionally, it was 5 lines long, not 3 like haiku, but 5, in the same kind of syllable count, 5, 7, 5, 2 extra lines, 7, 7 syllables each. And the themes include nature, love, loss, longing, and seasonal imagery, which reflects your feelings, an interior expression of your feelings by writers who wanted to take nature and do that with it. And we have many publications out there regarding tanka and also haiku, which you can enjoy, read, publish in today. How many remember the cherry blossom stamp in 2012? Yes, we had a cherry blossom stamp to honor what? The 100th year of the gift of cherry trees. 3,000 more, 3,000 cherry trees from Japan, from Tokyo to Washington, D.C. And guess what was on the back of that pane of stamps? A tanka poem. Yes. And here it is for you. The light filling the air is so mild this spring day, only the cherry blossoms keep falling in haste. Why is that so? And that is from the ancients by Kino Tomonori and translated by one of our current writers of haiku today. And there is an example of the cherry blossom stamp. And if that were not enough for you, yes, I do happen to have the pane that it came on. I saved one stamp, gave others to friends, but kept one. And on the back of it, this is it. There it is. And on the back is the tanka poem. I wonder if it might be part of the auction. Let me know if anybody would like to have it.
Yes, we'll put that up for auction.
Yes, Angela says yes, she would love to have that for auction. Yes.
So, just wanted you to see how relevant the tanka poem is. It's like invisible, but it's out there. And it's gaining more recognition as time goes on. So, and a little bit about background for this Japanese form that's called the haibun. And this is a longer form. And it has to do with prose and poetry and the combination thereof. So here we have Basho, you met previously, the revered Japanese poet, which he wrote this travel diary called The Narrow Road of the Deep North. And it was this travel diary where he dropped the last two lines of the tanka poem and let haiku stand by itself. So that's where we get the haiku today. And his diary is interspersed with haiku that pinpoint more concentrated moments of insight or spiritual enlightenment on his journey of 5 months in 1689. So this diary is the first example of the haibun form, a graceful mixture of prose and poetry that has become a classic landmark in the annals of world literature. And just a quote here from Basho. The sun and the moon are eternal voyagers. The years that come and go are travelers too. Each day is a journey, and the journey itself is home. A wandering spirit himself, he also studied Zen and meditated Zen, which affected his whole life. Okay. Now, a little bit as it relates to Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. What does this haibun have to do with Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings? The whole idea of journey is of interest here. And we'll get to that in a second, as soon as we read this oft-quoted line from the diary prologue that encapsulates the creative process for Basho and for many. And that is, go to the pine if you want to learn about the pine, or to the bamboo if you want to learn about the bamboo, and therefore become one with it. Writers and critics take this to heart, the need to enter into a subject at hand so fully that you become one with it and leave the subjective self behind and connect with nature and the spirit of place, probe the mysteries. Well, let's compare Basho's journey with the one that Rawlings took into the unlikely place for her, and that is the virtual wilderness, north central Florida or northwest Florida. Her keen powers of observation, which were brought into being at that spot, her love of nature, and her becoming one with it also. So a little bit about Japanese aesthetics as we delve deeper into the subject matter, and that's just like what was considered ideal and part of the culture. And this name sounds a little bit funny maybe, it's a little wabi-sabi as you see it here, and they're actually two separate names, but of late we have put them together because they run into each other all the time as we try to separate them and define them. So for us today, wabi-sabi, have you ever heard of it? Have you ever heard, be honest? No? Okay, good. Okay, a couple people, good. Wabi-sabi, the whole idea of having as an ideal the subdued, the quiet, austere beauty, a rustic patina to things, the weathered look, humble, ordinary, faded wood. So you get the idea. And finding beauty in imperfection, preferring the imperfect even. The perfect imperfection, broken plates, maybe mended as they are in the next item, maybe better than new, especially when they are mended, perhaps with powdered gold or silver, highlighting the mended object. And there is an art form that's going on even today called Kinnan, which is all about the mending of pottery. So Japanese design, to sum up, is known for its simplicity, its asymmetry, minimalism, and the natural less is more philosophy. These ideals are deeply rooted in Zen Buddhism and the humility associated with the traditional rustic tea ceremony of Japan, where the tea huts, the door for the tea huts was very low, so that to go into the tea hut you had to bend over, so that you began right away with this ideal. Okay. All right, now we'll see how Marjorie's haiku, these found haiku, reflect some of these ideals that we've just reviewed. Now remember Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings' house. We had a picture of it, and we all know of it. Some of us have been there. Some of us have been fortunate to have a tour and a tour guide to bring us into the place. And you know how she described her home. And she used this language to describe her home: weather-worn shabbiness. And here we have the haiku. Old weather-worn house. The newer cypress shingles make no difference. And in that passage, you can remember, if you've read it, many of you have, that she really preferred it that way. And that's a kind of acceptance of what is and the natural cycle of time as with things wear on. Sabi is the color of a poem, said Basho. A nice way to put it. Well, here's another ideal. I would be remiss if I didn't share this one with you. Mono no aware. The oddness of things. You know, you have perhaps gone to a cherry tree and go, it's so beautiful. But somewhere in your mind is also the realization that it's not going to be here for very long. So, symbolized by the cherry blossoms in Japanese sakura, so beautiful and so brief, symbolizes the transitory nature of life, the combination of beauty and sadness at the same time, and sorrow and serenity at the same time. It also, as a Japanese idiom, denotes an emotional connection to the world and the ephemeral nature of everything in it. A core sentiment of Japanese culture, the appreciation of beauty that will not last, the incomplete. Nothing lasts, nothing is finished, and nothing is permanent. And this elegant simplicity, a single flower perhaps, rather than a whole bouquet, and a magnolia branch. I must admit I wanted to break a magnolia branch and bring it in today, just to have here, but I didn't get to do that. And here, this tanka expressing the Japanese aesthetic of Mono no aware from South Moon Under. A red bird sings from a wild plum tree, white with blossoms, then instantly flies away, too beautiful to endure. And you might add, because we complete haiku and tanka as it settles into our minds, we might add from the ancient tanka poem that we heard on the back of the pane of cherry blossom. Why is that? Oh, why is that? Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings had just such a heightened consciousness of nature throughout her work. And one of the perspectives was from her long, widescreen veranda, where she could be inside or outside and look at nature. And that is where her sensory perception was amazing, as she appealed to all of our senses as she described what it is she saw and felt. And here, her awareness and her emphasis on the passing seasons, even naming chapters in Cross Creek for the seasons. Her poetry of place and her affection for the orange grove and of Cross Creek is a recurrent theme in her memoir. And her awareness of beauty, happiness, and contentment is often expressed. And if someone asked you, what is beauty? What is contentment? What is happiness? She says what it is in her memoir. And here we have some haiku about the seasonal imagery that she watched from her veranda, moment by moment. Summer morning, I watched the lotus petals falling one by one. Rainy afternoon, yellow fringed orchids abloom in damp flatwoods. Heavy humid air, cattle belly deep, feeding in water hyacinths. How's that for a picture? Did you love that? Belly deep, feeding in belly, water hyacinths, the combination. Haiku found from Jacob's Ladder reflects a classic by Basho, which we'll get to. You saw this already. October twilight, cypress waters alive with the splash of frog. Old sleepy pond, a frog jumps in, water splash. Sometimes translated as the splash of water, the sound of water, but the idea is the frog jumped in the water and you heard the sound. Okay, so this is probably the most well-known haiku in the international world. Okay, so if you didn't know it before, you know it now. It's famous, it's been translated, 30 times at least, written about. And you think, well, what, it's just a frog jumping into the water. What makes it that renowned? Think about it. And what does that pond reflect or suggest to you? Perhaps some inner consciousness that we have that something keeps splashing into. Or maybe we're all frogs jumping into the pond of life trying to make a great big splash. You can go on with him. But just a moment on the October twilight poem. Haiku does not rhyme, but is full of assonance, which means the repetition of vowel sounds. And if you look at that poem and see the repetition of sound, if you wonder why something works, we don't always know why, consciously, but unconsciously we do. And it's the sound, the music, and the rhythm. October twilight, cypress waters alive, frog, the repetition of sound is what makes that poem come alive. And both of them, I think, reflect one another. And it's amazing that we can take something from Marjorie's work and connect it back to Basho's work. And here we have Summer's Song at the Creek. And this is full of sound. Morning at the creek, swarms of wild bees abuzz in the sweet gum tree. Afternoon birdsong, wild red and white hibiscus line the riverbanks. A covey of quail in the blackberry thicket, soft cries in the night. You often mention that covey of quail in the blackberry thicket. Haiku found, and you already saw this one, rare Florida snow, the hiss of pine needles on cypress shingles. The hiss of pine needles. I love that. And it's so evocative. It sounds like what it is. Hiss of pine needles. And even again, the assonance at work in this particular haiku has to be one of my favorites. A Tonka poem found from the winter chapter of Cross Creek. At the times when cold weather comes and everything is put on hold as we wait for that drop of temperature to the 28 degrees when the smoke pots have to be lit. And this cold snap at the grove, I pull strands of Spanish moss from the pecan trees, tenderly cap the garden plants, and light the fat wood fires. Though it's not only the orange grove that we must protect when that temperature drops, it's also the garden that's full of food. After all, that's where our food comes from. So that was important also. What about winter and the hunt? Marjorie did go out and hunt. She didn't really take to the idea, but she took that adventure and was just as happy when she didn't actually have a kill as she was when she once in a while did. But what happened, beating the sunrise, I mean, you really go out early, right? If you're going to go hunting. Beating the sunrise, our first day of season hunt, off to the big scrub. The ribbon of smell, our hunting dogs' long ears flapping in the breeze. This was taken from a moment in Cross Creek where they were riding to the spot where they were going to hunt, and the dogs' heads were outside the car, and hence the flapping in the breeze as they moved along. Did Marjorie ever write haiku? Did Marjorie ever write tanka? Did Marjorie ever write haiku? Well, I think she wrote haiku. But she did not, as far as we can tell, write haiku. But haiku became popularized in this country in the 60s, in the early 60s, when the first journal was published regarding haiku. So it's after. And I have no doubt that she probably would have written quite a few as that took over here after her death in 1953. So the answer at this point is no, but, and that's a big but, because she does express an awareness of the Japanese aesthetic in her work. And here is one example. In the Cross Creek chapter, The Ancient Enemy, about snakes, Rawlings describes a black snake crawling among the leaves and compares it to a Japanese brushstroke. And out of that, a black garden snake flows like water among leaves. Japanese brushstroke. Yes. What is happiness? She defines it many times, or at least alludes to it many times in her work. And from the Magnolia Tree chapter, and you know how much she loved magnolia trees, she admires its broad leaves shining like dark polished jade. I break a few sprays for the house and find them an ornament of which a Japanese artist would approve. That speaks volumes of her connection to the Japanese aesthetic, of which she was aware. And two haiku from that. Polished jade leaves, I break a branch for the house, so polished and plain. Finding happiness, Magnolia grandiflora, all I'll ever need. Just as fun to say Magnolia grandiflora. So, the pleasure of place. And Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings can create plays like no other writer I've ever read. And her ability to capture the moment in a haiku like this. Off to sleep at night, drowning in perfumed waters, the grove in bloom. You're just drowning in perfumed waters, the grove in bloom. From Jacob's Ladder. South Moon Under, wonderful passage that creates this scene where everyone's having a good time because it's cane grinding time. And so it's a celebration of that process, the end of that process. And the combination of hardships and happiness combined here in this cane grinding scene. Cane grinding frolic, young girls plump and buxom dance with painted faces. Gaunt old women know the road is hard but good too. Acceptance is key. And you know, one of the things that amazes me so much as I read the work of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings and the three places that this comes from, Cross Creek, South Moon, and Jacob's Ladder in particular, but there are others too, is the way her characters accept their lives, the poverty, and the way that they carry on. What is contentment? Orange lake by night, the soft set of the jessamine, perfume from the stars, sensory perception at work. What is beauty? Beauty at the creek, candlelight on the bookshelf, logs and fat wood fire. And the hyacinth chapter, which I call prose poetry, it's so enchanting. Water hyacinths, at night the marsh is silver, water steely gray, floating hyacinths, now drifting faintly faster, the pulse of the river, feeling the river water, familiar flowing water, one with it at last. That moment when they realize that the hyacinths are going in the direction very quickly, that will take them from this channel to the river, and it changes their perspective. And Tonka from South Moon Under, the dark river flows like a dream between dreams until the young man, the river, and the nearby banks gradually become one. And that whole idea of becoming one with the nature is mentioned here again by an ancient who expresses the idea of Japanese poetry has the human heart as a seed, and so does Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings express the cosmic secrecy of seed. And so the final passage of Cross Creek has remarkable similarities to the 10th century Japanese work that probes the mysteries of the universe. The voice of the frog, the voice of the poet, the voice of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. Every living creature sings a truth she knows so well. So the last chapter and the final paragraph and the final words we would have to end with. Who owns Cross Creek? The birds, the wind, and the rain, the sun and the seasons, the cosmic secrecy of seed, and beyond all, time.